being abused and being told that you're not anything, or that you're stupid, or you're just all of the things that comes with somebody who's abusing you. That's what I emerged with. That how I felt about things and what I knew about things are two different things. They're two separate entities. And so how did I feel when I found out my husband had an affair? I felt like I wanted to set him on fire and drive over him 2 or 3 times, and probably do that 3 times a day, and probably do that for a whole month. And then when I was all done, set him on fire again. That's how I felt. Oh, and I would read and I would look in the book and I would say, this is how it's supposed to go, even though I really want to take over and I want to do it. What a lesson it was for me in trusting him. To me, it was like he was saying, see, that don't worry about stuff. You do what I tell you to do and you're going to be fine. I was born and raised in the state of Maine. My family wasn't particularly religious. I think my grandparents went to church, but certainly my parents didn't. And, you know, they got divorced when I was fairly young. My father basically disappeared. And I mention that only because that, looking back on it, that was a significant event in my life. I think especially for girls, women, you know, you don't have a good father figure, and he disappeared. My stepfather was a nice guy, but he, you know, had a lot of drinking problems for quite a few years. He did stop drinking, so it was all of that. I got saved when I was relatively young, and the reason I'm convinced that I was 6 or 7 years old, and I attended, I had a babysitter, and their oldest daughter came back from college and was having little Bible classes for all of us little kids. And so she explained who Jesus was, that he died for us, that he loved us. It was a never-ending love, and was really inviting us to accept him and bring him into our lives and ask him into our heart. And I can remember being brought into a room and repeating the prayer that she had me do, and all of that, which I know a lot of children do. And then later on, as adults, they'll say, yeah, but I didn't really understand it. I did understand it, and I remember, just like it was last week, laying in my bed and crying because I thought, my mother is never going to do this, and I'm going to end up being without her. In other words, I envisioned myself going to heaven, and my mother was not going to be there because I thought she's never going to accept him. It was just my thought. So I knew it was something serious, and interestingly, she's 82, and as of this date, I am not aware of her ever accepting that, and I, you know, still hoping and praying that happens. But I just find that an interesting that I knew that so well at that young age, and now I'm 66, and so we're still dealing with that. But so as far as people ask you to give your testimony, and I certainly don't want to seem insensitive, but pretty much we're all broken people, and everybody's testimony is about the same. You know, we're broken. You're either addicted, you drank, or you took drugs, or you cheated, or your spouse cheated, or I mean, we're just all broken. And so I will say that my history is no different than anybody else's. I have all of that included. So certainly to tell people what Jesus has done for me, there are sort of a few significant events, and one of them is I was married previously to a very abusive man. And so anybody who is in that situation or knows of somebody that's in that situation, you're familiar with all of the things, all of the baggage that you come with. I was able, after 10 years, to get out of it. But of course, you know, being abused and being told that you're not anything, or that you're stupid, or you're just all of the things that comes with somebody who's abusing you. That's what I emerged with. So when I met my current husband, I brought all of that with me. And, you know, we got married, and one of the things that, you know, I think that the church in general sort of falls down on is we never received any practical advice on, how do you have a good marriage? How do you get through this? It was always, well, just read your Bible and pray and, come to all the meetings. And that's a great thing. Yes, you certainly need to do that. But Jesus, he uses people to help other people. And so you need some practical advice. So I got married, the second time, and it was wonderful. And but eventually, because we really didn't know how to do it, we went to church. We went to a very legalistic church, so there was a lot of rules and regulations. The very reason why a lot of people say, "Don't talk to me. I don't want to talk about it," because you're right. It's you can't do it. All these, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, which is not at all what Jesus is about. Not at all what he's about. And so we left, and that began our, we stopped going to church, we stopped reading the Bible, and so, we went right back to our natural selves, which we all do. And so my husband ended up having an affair, and for a lot of women, that's a deal breaker. It's like, that's it, I'm all done, I'm never going to forgive you, but you can't, you can't really do that. I was forgiven a lot. Jesus forgave me for a lot. And so here's the thing that Jesus has done for me when that situation came about. I had to learn, or I did learn, and that how I felt about things and what I knew about things are two different things. They're two separate entities. And so how did I feel when I found out my husband had an affair? I felt like I wanted to set him on fire and drive over him 2 or 3 times, and probably do that 3 times a day, and probably do that for a whole month. And then when I was all done, set him on fire again. That's how I felt. But making decisions on how you feel, I would not recommend it, okay? So, but what did I know? I knew that we both loved God. I knew that what we had was something that was supposed to be put together and not taken apart. And so we talked and we agreed that we were really going to work on it. And we went to counseling. We were very truthful. And I think the most important thing is he allowed me the freedom to not feel the way I was doing things. I was reconciling with him. I was meeting with him. We were having meals together. We were nice to each other, but I didn't feel that way. And it was okay. That was okay. Because I was doing what I knew to be the right thing to do. And amazingly, the feelings caught up. The feelings caught up. And I would certainly encourage any woman that's out there that is saved, that loves Jesus, and her husband loves Jesus, and you're going through anything like that, is the feelings will catch up. Because I can remember one day actually waking up thinking, wow, I actually don't want to kill him today. That's pretty awesome, and it came. And so we certainly did reconcile, and things got a lot better, and so I certainly praise Jesus for that, how you feel about things, don't confuse them with what you need to do. And you can apply that to any part of your life. If you're somebody who's like, I don't know if Jesus can forgive me. Okay, well, what do you know about that? And you go to Scripture and you find out you're already forgiven. He's forgiven you for what you did in the past. He's forgiven you for what you might be doing today. And what you're going to do tomorrow, he already knows. So if you know that, regardless, you may not feel that way, there's where the freedom comes in. You can grab right a hold of that and say, I know this to be true. I don't feel that way. That'll catch up. And the more you do that, you'd be surprised at how often your feelings will start to line up with what I call right thinking. And so I'm very happy that Jesus has done that for me and for us, for our marriage. The other thing for sure, a testimony of what Jesus has done in my life, is coming out of something that's very abusive. Instead of remaining a victim, I became somebody who was very controlling. And so my attitude, of course, was that is never going to happen to me again. Ever. No man is going to tell me what to do. They're not going to just not happening. So Brian, my poor husband, I mean, if he even began to suggest that we might do something, it'd be like, nope, nope, I'm going to be in charge. Well, that doesn't work scripturally. You know, he just couldn't tell me anything. And if he said it in maybe a tone of voice that wasn't quite right, well, that was absolutely going to be certain that I wasn't going to do it. So I would say another way that Jesus has certainly worked in my life is to teach me and to give me the wisdom so that I'm going back to what I know, not how I felt. How I felt was I was afraid. I was afraid. No one was ever going to control me like that again. No one was ever going to abuse me like that again. But what I knew was that my husband had to lead, and I had a different job in the marriage. And he didn't want to lead. See, and I think that's also another problem that we have today, even in the church. We have a lot of men. I think there's lots of reasons why this happens, but you know, they're just as happy to let their wives go and do things, and you know, and they've just forgotten that they need to step up and they need to be the man of the household. And I certainly am not saying that you pound on your chest and you're a dictator and all that, but that you have to lead. So he didn't want to do that, and so Jesus is certainly, because of things that I knew, I would go and I would read and I would look in the book and I would say, this is how it's supposed to go, even though I really want to take over and I want to do it. But I would speak into my husband and he would be like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I was like, yes, you can do this. I know you can do this. I'm right here. You go do this. And it took quite a few years, but slowly I could see him start to, you know, reach for those things. It's like, oh, you know, she thinks I can do it. And it was sort of giving him confidence. And so every time that step happened, that just made my life better. And so again, it was that thing, is like I didn't feel like it, and I knew I was afraid, but I recognized that these were feelings that I was having, and what did I know? What was the truth of the matter? And that has been, you know, again, that's just something that Jesus put in my heart, and it's made a huge difference. And so my husband certainly stepped up and started leading, and that made it much easier. And of course, he seeks my advice, and you know, just sort of a going back and forth and back and forth. So I've been very grateful for that. And the other thing is, he wanted to go to Africa, and so because I have that tendency to control, I also take care of the finances in our family. And so we sold our house. We were living in our motorhome full time, and it was a smaller motorhome. And then we decided we wanted a larger one because, you know, we're going to live in it full time. So of course we need a bigger refrigerator and all that sort of stuff. So we had a good deal drop in our lap. And so suddenly I was the owner of 2 motorhomes. So now I'm getting nervous. So this is learning how to trust Jesus, which is not an easy thing to do. And people who just say, oh, you know, trust Jesus. And then, you know, you make a lot of decisions that clearly show that you do not. So, and I was right in that category. As long as my bank account had plenty of money, then I felt nice and happy. As soon as it started to go down, it was, who was I trusting, right? Even though I read the scriptures like everybody else, it's like, he provides for us, he gives you everything that you need, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I was lecturing my husband, and I said to him, don't even think about spending any money. I now own 2 motorhomes. We got to get rid of one. I felt like we were hemorrhaging money. I take care of the bills. Don't even ask to buy a candy bar. It's not happening. And of course, my husband, who has learned to be a great leader, instead of his response being, don't tell me what to do, he just sort of kind of smiled and he said, well, he goes, here's the thing. And I thought, oh Lord, there's a thing. I can't handle having a thing. And he proceeded to tell me that he was really being convicted to go to Africa with his pastor, who was going to go to Africa to do some ministry with his brother-in-law. And I thought, oh, okay, so what are you going to do in Africa? You're not a pastor. Why are you? He's like, I'm just being really convicted to go. So I said, okay, let me look up and see what round trip tickets are to Nairobi. And so I'm sitting in the driveway of the guy that we bought this motorhome from, just got done giving him thousands of dollars, so I'm not in a really good frame of mind, and I'm confused because I didn't know anything about, he was, he'd been struggling with this for several weeks, and we'd had no conversations about it whatsoever. So I get online and I'm looking, and it's all round trip tickets to Nairobi, Africa, Kenya is $4,800, $5,000, and I thought, you have got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. I thought I was going to faint, right? So I finally said to him, I need to go home, because I'm looking at it on my iPhone. And so I said, we have to go home so that I can look at my laptop. And all the way home, we rode in silence. And I was praying. And I just said, and when I talked to my Lord, I talked to him just as though he's standing right there. It's not real fancy. It's not what, you see in church, and people always say, oh, I wish I could pray like that. I can't. I just talk to him. And I said to him, listen, I don't have to explain to you what I'm like. You're very well acquainted. I'm losing my mind because he wants to spend all this money. But I can't interfere with that. If you have actually told him to go, then I know I can't interfere with that. So my only request is that you make it so that I don't feel like I want to throw up. And that was my request. And I'm sure the nicer way to put that was I was asking him for peace, but that's not my personality. I would just I just don't want to feel like I'm going to throw up. So we're going to do this, but I can't stand this feeling. So if you could just take care of that, Lord, that would be great. And so we went home and we got everything. And I think I was even shaking, and I got my laptop out and I started in, and because I had to match the tickets that the pastor had, because he'd gotten his tickets 2 months before. So I had, that challenge. So I got it all done, I got everything all matched, and then I, brought it up and said, okay, what are the prices? And the first price that came up, which was an exact match to the pastor flying into Kenya, was $980. 15 minutes before, it was a $5,000 round trip. That's all that I could see as I was scrolling. The only difference was that I realized, and it was wonderful, personal growth on mine, that I was willing to just say, yep, I'll empty the savings account because I'm not going to interfere with that. That's fine. It is what it is. I just can't deal with it. I just, want peace about it. I said I don't want to throw up about it. And I got there and it was $980. So all in context, you imagine how happy I was to spend $980. That was great. So, and it's not that, he works that way every single time, but what a lesson it was for me in trusting him. To me, it was like he was saying, see, that don't worry about stuff. You do what I tell you to do, and you're going to be fine. And so that was huge for me. And my husband was also in shock because he had expected me. He'd been married to me for 30 some odd years at that point. So I'm sure he was expecting this was going to be a big fight, or just, he didn't even know how he was going to have, and then have me go, great, 900, here, let me write out the check and you go. So he did. He went to Africa, and I'm so glad that he went because even though he wasn't speaking at the convention, it turned out that his testimony was actually for the African women who are not viewed as equal partners there at all. They're still sort of personal property, and they take care of the children. They actually do all the, house. They do all of the work really, and a lot of the men aren't even working. I mean, they don't have a good view of women, and so my husband comes in and he's in the kitchen with the women, which is something they're not used to. And he's cooking and he's cleaning and he's running the mop and he's doing all these things. And he's actually showing them that this is what a true man does. He can mop and he can fight the tigers. It's whatever needs to be done. And they were not used to that. And it was just an eye-opening and a blessing for them. And so now I'm just thrilled that I was not the kind of person to say, no, you're not going there because we can't afford it and you're emptying and so, and that's trust. And I realize how hard that is, but I would encourage anybody. It's like, it's a scary thing to do for sure, but what a blessing. So he certainly has, that's just the most important thing. He's taught me to trust him. And do I do it perfectly every time? No, I do not. I absolutely do not. There are times that even little tiny things I don't trust him, and then there are other things that are big things that I do. So I'm a work in progress like everybody else. But I would say the biggest thing that he has done for me, because I'm broken like everybody else, is, and the world is chaotic. It's just chaotic, right? And so you have all these feelings. I'm afraid that somebody's not going to like me, or I'm afraid he's going to be mad at me, or I'm angry because this happened, or so all of these feelings. And then I realized I can't act on those. I can't act on those feelings. I have to go back to what I know. And the book, you open it up and it's instruction for the whole life, your whole life. How do you bring up kids? How do you treat your wife? How do you treat your husband? How do you treat a total stranger? Everything is in there. So I can know what I'm supposed to do. I may not feel that way, but I know what I'm supposed to do. And so I keep reminding myself, do what you know is the right thing. And sort of don't worry so much about how you feel, because I'm human, I'm flawed. And so I'm going to have these feelings. I'm going to be mad about things. And sometimes I have to embrace those feelings for a few minutes. I just don't make decisions on it. It's like, well, I'm not going to do that at church because that just makes me feel uncomfortable. Well, okay. And so I'll indulge in that feeling for a day or two or a week or whatever. But eventually I go back and go, what am I supposed to do in this situation? And then I try to do it. And it's, my husband always talking about freedom and the freedom that he feels. And for me, that's where I get my freedom. So I don't have to worry now about, the legalistic part of churches that we used to belong to before we did our 20-year slide. And, what are people going to think? And, I'm 66. I have a tattoo on my arm. What if they don't like that? I don't worry about any of those things, because the only person that I really need to worry about is Jesus. And so now I go and say, what does he say about that? Well, and it's a personal relationship, which is what I love. So what is right for me may not be a liberty that you can have. So my husband was an alcoholic. He cannot have anything to drink. I don't drink either. I choose not to, because why would I do that in front of him? Why would I even do that? That's crazy. I love him. I wouldn't bring that into the house. I wouldn't do all that. But the fact of the matter is I don't have a problem with alcohol, never did. I literally could have a drink, set it down, and never do it again for 3 years, and it wouldn't make any difference to me. And so that's what I mean by a personal relationship, personal liberties. We have friends that I think of a lovely man that used to come to our house, and he didn't like to play cards. And part of it stemmed because his father abandoned his family because he was a gambler. So, it's sort of a sore spot, and he just doesn't want anything to do with it. So when we used to invite him over, I certainly didn't invite him over and say, hey, let's play cards. That was something that he couldn't do. He saw it as sin. It was for him. He didn't want to touch it. But when he left, I didn't put that on me. I didn't say, well, I guess if I want to be a good Christian, I shouldn't play cards. It's like my husband and I play cards with each other all the time. We got a few hours to kill. So there you go. There's freedom. There's freedom in Christ. Anybody who goes to a Calvary chapel, you can go and you can dress up for women and put your heels on, or you can go in your shorts and your flip-flops, or there's guys there that get tattoos all over them. And I also know men who go there with their, not many that go with suit ties, but I've certainly seen it. And Chuck Smith was a suit and tie kind of guy. So there's the freedom. And I think if people can get a hold of that, all I can think of is, in Jeremiah when he says, I know the plans I have for you. It's very specific. And so there's just a lot of freedom in that. And so that's what Jesus has done for me. It came from a broken person who believed that she wasn't any good, that she was stupid, that she deserved the abuse that she got, which is what happens with women who are in an abusive relationship. He brought me into that freedom, and so that confidence that I can look. He's given me a manual and said, this is how I go. This is how I treat with people, and this is how I should react, or how I should look at it when people don't treat me well. There's just freedom in that. And so I would encourage anybody, if you're looking at this and you're struggling with it and you're not sure what to do, Jesus is really the way, and you can know for yourself. Don't take somebody else's word for it. Do not be that person. Do not go to a church just because the guy behind the pulpit says so. He's flawed just like you, and he may in fact be telling you the truth, but the book is for all of us. You read it, you know it. He will give you wisdom liberally, he says. If you want wisdom, ask for it. He'll give it to you, and you'll know. So that's really my story in a nutshell. That's it. How can they pray for me? Well, I am like a reformed smoker. I am so happy to know how to separate my thoughts and feelings and what that has done for me. And so the prayers that I would like is a friend of mine and myself, we're hoping to write a little book on that and sort of giving different scenarios, and then going around and speaking to groups of people at church or whatever, because I think that there's a lot of confusion out there. So the prayers that I would ask for is that the Lord would bless that, and that we were able to get that out, information out to people. And I just think it's an eye-opener, and it's something that's really near and dear to my heart, and the Lord has certainly spoken to me about it, and just prayers that we do Him the honor, and that we're able to do it and reach a lot of people, or the people that need it, even if it's not a lot. I don't care if it's 10 people, that we reach the 10 people that need it.